All right, so hopefully that helped cleared up a little things with the press. But like I said, the key thing to understand about the internet is it's unknown because so much stuff on the internet is just fake. It's not real, it's false, and it's hard to hold people accountable. And we really don't have much case law to dictate how we're going to do that, and how what's the difference between a parody like Weird Al making fun of somebody or a news site like the tabloids at your grocery store, and that justification. And we're struggling with that. Um, Michael Moore. Michael Moore, if you know who Michael Moore is, he's made documentaries like Fahrenheit 9/11. He's very liberal. His documentaries are very one sided. But the information that he uses is true. He just doesn't show all the sides to that information. So it's a very biased piece of information. And he presents the way that he interprets that information. Is that news? Or is he not fair in what he's doing? There's been some conservative uh, younger documentary makers that have gotten out there and made documentaries that are extremely one-sided and very biased. Waiting for Superman is a pro-charter school, anti-public school movie that was made, documentary that is extremely biased against public schools. Doesn't mean the information's false, but it's not shown in the proper context or the bigger picture. So people watch it and walk away and they think that every charter school is successful, every public school is failing, and that's not the case. There's some charter schools that are doing well, there's some that are failing, there's some public schools that are doing well, there's some that are failing. So if you only show a sliver, are you really showing news or are you doing something else? And because of freedom of press and freedom of speech and expression, we really haven't done much to limit those things. And so we have, and this is getting worse and worse. We're seeing this get worse and worse, and we haven't seen a line drawn in the sand. There was a guy that was anti-teachers union, just blatantly anti-teachers union. And a couple years ago, he made a documentary that he claimed was shot at the New Jersey State Teachers Union's conference. And if you watch this video, it's all these teachers bashing parents, bashing kids, talking about their vacation homes, talking about their vacations and their trips to Tahiti and Europe and their, BMWs and how they're going to milk the taxpayers for everything they want. And he released it. And the governor of New Jersey, Chris Christie, showed parts of this video to explain why he's anti-teacher union. And that's very common with conservatives. They don't like unions, especially teachers unions. And it turned out that this guy, when he made the video, he went out and he went undercover to the the state teachers conference, and he walked around and he kept asking these questions. And he kept trying to get people to answer him, but they didn't give him what he wanted. So he waited 2 weeks and then brought in a bunch of actors, and everything he showed in his video was these actors acting like teachers, getting paid to be teachers, bashing parents. And he filmed all of that, and then he reported it as a documentary. And then when he got caught, his justification is, well, I knew that's what the teachers really meant, and I knew that's what the union really stands for. So because I knew it was true, they just didn't bite. They knew that I was infiltrating them. They knew that I was spying on them, so they didn't tell me the truth. So I just went ahead and created the truth so that people could see it, because I know that's the reality of what's going on. Okay, traditionally that's not news, but that is being allowed right now, and that's the internet being completely crazy, and we're just not for sure how to handle it. All right, moving on. So you have a right to petition, you have a right to assemble. What this means is you have a right to disagree with the government, and you have a right to take action to demonstrate or show that you disagree with the government, and you have a protected right. You can protest, you can do walkouts, you can do sit-outs, you can get petitions signed. You have a right to let the politicians, the governments, the people in charge know that you do not agree with what's going on. Now, we can regulate the time, the place, and the manner. And what that means is that you cannot hold a rally where you are going to be firing off cannons at 2:30 in the morning on a Tuesday. Okay, we can dictate the time and say that you want to do this protest, that's fine, but we're going to say that you have to do it this time. And the same thing, that it's the place. And what these rules actually come down to is the government's trying to make sure that your protest is not harming or interfering with other Americans that have absolutely nothing to do with your protest. So you can't go ahead and block off streets in a farming town when you're protesting big oil. Okay. Now, your protest is tied to what you're doing. They don't limit you that much. There was a big protest in New York City years ago, anti-smoking protest, and they had all these people that in front of one of the big tobaccos, I don't remember which one it was, but one of their companies, they all collapsed and act like they were dead. And they're like, well, people can't get into work. People can't step over them. People, this is crazy. And no, that's just a protest. That's those people's rights to protest your business. And they have a right to do that within reason, and their protest was tied to your industry, and it was the right place, and it was the right time, and the way that they did it wasn't obscene, it wasn't over the top, it wasn't crazy. It may have been an inconvenience, but that's part of what a protest is. The other aspect of a protest that they're also trying to protect is everybody can protest, which is great when you're protesting for something you believe in. But what happens when that group, those people that you don't agree with protest? Their rights are protected too. And so we have seen, even today, the Ku Klux Klan still has some members, and they will still protest from time to time. And they have a protected right. You can't pick and choose who can protest. Just like you can't pick and choose who can say this. Okay, you have to protect speech, you have to protect protest, you have to protect assembly, you have to protect those things in general terms. You can regulate to protect other people, but you cannot create a rule where this group can never hold a protest. Because if they can't, then nobody can. So you don't want to create a situation where the Ku Klux Klan is protesting next to a Martin Luther King rally. That's only going to create violence and cause a huge issue. So they can address the manner there. They can address those kind of things when they set up that protest and trying to protect different groups. And then you can get in trouble when you protest if you cross the line. In Akron in like 2007, 2008, and I'm sorry, not Akron, I think it was Toledo actually. There was a protest, and the Ku Klux Klan had this big rally in downtown Toledo, and then they decided to leave where they were supposed to protest and march through an African American neighborhood to tell the African Americans that lived there what they thought. So imagine you're living in your neighborhood, it's a Saturday afternoon, you're chilling, you're barbecuing, you're enjoying yourself, you're playing with your kids, whatever, in your front lawn, and then all of a sudden the Ku Klux Klan starts marching down your street with no warning and starts saying the most hateful things in the world that you've ever heard directed at you. Well, just like you're probably thinking, I'd kick their butt. That's what happened. The people that living there ended up getting in fights with the Klan members. And, the Klan members try to say, they attacked us, that was assault, they crossed the line. Reality was, no, the Klan crossed the line. They had a place they were supposed to protest. They left that place, and they incited those people to be violent against them. And they got in trouble for it. So those are why we regulate protests. It's not to stop your message. You have a right. It's the same thing with civil disobedience. Civil disobedience, when you are breaking a law in order to make a point that that law is wrong, that law should not be in place. You can do that. Now you have to deal with the consequence, but you going public about it, you making a case about it, the government can't shut you up about that. So if you are sitting in jail or you are at the IRS protesting and those kind of things, the government cannot stop you in the name of your protest if you're following the communications, the freedom of speech stuff. Now, like I said, civil disobedience, you're breaking a law, and they can apply the normal punishments for those. But that's the limit. Beyond that, you're allowed to do that. And so we see that all the time. So like if you remember the Black Lives protest this last summer up in Cleveland, to stop and get people to notice, they shut down part of the freeway by walking across the freeway and standing there. You're not allowed to be on the freeway. That's illegal. That's you can get in trouble for being on the freeway. But they did it, and that was civil disobedience. Now, it was a protest, but it was a mixture of civil disobedience. Not everybody agrees, but the government has to be very careful because there's a fine line of what the government's allowed to do to stop a protest when they're stopping their message versus stopping an inappropriate behavior. And that's the key thing with the regulations. You can't stop the message. You can stop inappropriate behaviors if you can justify it. All right. And then the last thing we're going to talk about, second to last thing we're going to talk about is your Second Amendment to rights. So, well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of the free state, The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. This statement right here, a well-regulated militia, is what causes the most controversy with the Second Amendment, because we don't have a militia anymore. Our militia in the early 1900s was turned into the National Guard. So if any of you guys joined the Army National Guard, the Air Force National Guard, you're joining essentially what the militia is. And your military level equipment is tied to you being a part of the National Guard. It's not 1800 anymore where you're worried about the Indians breaking into your house. It's not 1786 or 1776 where you're worried about the British marching through your town and shooting you. Okay? We aren't worried about those kind of threats. So because of that, we don't have a public civilian army. We're not worried about having to fight a war on a day-to-day basis. Not saying it will never happen, and this is stuff that you guys can bring up in your debate tomorrow, throw out as a question of the day, but that's just not a part of our society right now. We have the strongest military. We have enough that we don't have a draft. We don't have those issues. We're worried about fighting a war. So if you take away this part, and then that causes being necessary to security of freedom, a free state, to disappear. All you're left is the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. And this is what's debated. If you're a pro-Second Amendment person, you say, hey, people have the right to keep and bear arms. It shall not be infringed. If you're anti-Second Amendment, when you're talking about the different types of guns, a well-regulated militia being necessary to free the state is not necessary anymore. So you don't need the right to keep and bear arms. And that's where the debate centers on, is whether or not you feel like the militia is needed and you should be able to have your guns, or a militia is not needed and you don't need your guns, or the right of the people to keep and bear arms. So this is heavily debated. You have debates about the type of guns. You have handguns for personal security, shotguns and rifles for hunting and sport, okay, playing, target shooting. And then you have the different types of features, your long scopes that allow you to shoot things at 100 million miles away. The handles that basically take a regular gun and turn into an assault rifle, which an assault rifle means that you're able to fire a lot of rounds into a controlled area. So if you have a front handle on your gun like you see in the movies, you can pull that trigger, hold it at your hip, and you can be relatively accurate. Versus a rifle, you got to hold up to your shoulder, look down the barrel of the gun, and you got to figure that out. Those kind of things. Your high magazines, meaning, some guns have magazines that only allow you to have 8 bullets in it, versus automatic weapons and the old Tommy guns with the big old, round canisters that could let you have 90 bullets in it. Okay, are those necessary to meet the needs of the people? What should you be able to use a gun for? Okay, we're very clear. You are allowed to have a gun to protect yourself. That's a handgun. The Supreme Court has made rulings. Handguns cannot be banned. So what does that mean beyond that? That's where we get into some gray areas, because you can have a rifle or a shotgun for hunting, for sport, and for collecting. That's protected. But then you have this level of weapons, of these assault weapons, where you're basically talking about weapons that their primary purpose is to kill humans in the best way possible. And that's where we see laws trying to really regulate them, trying to stop those features, try to stop those guns, and try to make sure that the average person's not walking around with landmines or bazooka and hurting other people. And that's where that accessories comes in. What are you allowed to defend yourself with? A handgun? That's allowed. A bazooka? No, you're going to hurt somebody else. Okay, and so we have a ton of debate. This is not a settled issue. People do not agree with this. Okay, but that's the center of this. But you have a fundamental right to bear arms. Right now it's understood as a handgun, shotgun, and a single-shot rifle. Everything else is what is debated and questioned. Explosives, those kind of things. So tomorrow, and you got the rest of the period to work on this, but tomorrow, when you come in, you need to create questions. And I told you this yesterday in your notes, to submit as a debate. You're going to write them down at the very beginning of the class, and we're going to actually pick at random whatever the question is for the fishbowl. So it can be for the First Amendment, it can be for the Second Amendment, it can be for any aspect of it. And you will also have an opportunity when the debate starts kind of winding where you can do a follow-up question to try to get it going again. So if I sit there and say, I believe that assault rifles should be banned 100%, and then people start going nuts. And then it starts settling down, and I'm like, that includes handguns, because in this day and age, the police can do their job. Hey, so you're going to get that kind of double level there, and I'll explain that tomorrow. All right, peace out. See you tomorrow. Get to work.